individualization, divine design. And another way of saying it is that quality Christian schooling is going to be done through an individualized program. I'll put it another way. I'll say, if it is you want a quality school, you ought have an individualized system. And if you don't, I won't finish that statement. But I am putting myself way out on a limb. And now, I'd like to give you reasons why I can say that. I can say that. I don't know that you can. I'll let you be the judge. I'll present the material, and then you decide if it is your thinking or not. But here we go. Individualization, I believe it is a divine design. Well, what do you call it when the second child to a set of parents is different from the first child? What do you call it when the third child is different from the other two? Well, some would say it's a matter of birth order because the oldest child is different from the youngest child. Okay, so let's have some fun with this idea. By the way, you can buy a book on this subject, and there probably is something to it. But I want you to cooperate with me, and I'm going to have you stand. So you be prepared. How many of you are the oldest child in your family, or the only child, I guess we would say? Stand up and remain standing. Okay? Now, I want everyone in the room to turn around and look. I want you to look at who is standing and who is not. Turn around. I mean, don't be afraid. And those of you standing, smile. But here's what I want everyone to know, that these people, the oldest children, are very bossy. They always tell everybody else what to do, how to do it, when to do it. They're boss, boss, boss. Older children are always the boss. You may sit down. Yes, that is the way oldest children tend to be. How many of you are you're not the oldest, you are not the youngest. You're somewhere in the middle of the pack. Please stand and remain standing and smile. Turn around. I didn't ask the other people to turn around. I want you to rotate 360 degrees so everybody sees your smiling face. Now, observe who is standing, because, folks, you are looking at people who are very obedient. Yes, because they sit back down, you. Because they learned how to work with their oldest, the brother or sister, and being in the middle of the pack, they had to obey. Now, they're very obedient, albeit they are full of deception. Because they obey on the outside, but on the inside, they are strategizing their way of getting around. You may be seated. Conniving. Well, now I save the best till last. Those of us who are the youngest of the family, please stand up. Please stand up. Now rotate 360 degrees, please and thank you. Smile and remain standing, because I want everyone to see who it is that is a big baby. They always got their own way. Their mom and dad ran out of parenting long ago, and so whatever they want, they're going to do. Big baby, big baby. You may be seated. Well, actually, I am not quite the baby, but I am. I'm the 8th of 9 children, or the 9th of 10, if you count the one that passed away right after birth. But I was the baby of the family. At least my older brothers and sisters said I was. And how it is, I had five older sisters. Yes, ma'am, yes, ma'am, yes, ma'am, yes, ma'am, yes, ma'am. No wonder I am the way I am. You have 6 mothers and see what happens to you. Oh, my. Hoya moya. Birth order, I think, does have something to do with who it is we are. Some say, well, no, it's more a matter of temperament types. Thank you to the ancient Greeks. Thank you, Tim LaHaye, who in modern times, a couple of decades ago, popularized the 4 temperament types: spirit-controlled temperament, and great books, by the way. I recommend you have them in your library. And so he said for the ancient Greeks, one was the choleric. That is the headstrong, focused leader who acts as if no one else has a good idea. Only I'll give you your opinion when I want it. That is a choleric. And then there is the sanguine. Oh, the sanguine, the happy-go-lucky, the backslapper, That's me. I'm sanguine, probably 100%, for good and for ill. And then there is the choleric. No, not the choleric, the sanguine. Then the phlegmatic. The phlegmatic is this laid back. Whatever will be, will be. The future's not mine. They're not going to see the future because they won't get there. They have no hurry in them. You say, hurry up. And they say, yes, I'll hurry. I'm hurrying as fast as I can. The phlegmatic, how do you describe them? Our 3rd child in our family. And then the melancholy. The melancholy is this person who takes life super seriously. And they often have a wrinkle in their brow. And they're very suspicious that someone somewhere is having a good time. And they all end up being school teachers. And my wife says, Del, God gave this world the melancholy so that you sanguines understand that the world is not to be viewed through rose-colored glasses. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Temperament types. There's something to it. I learned so much from the book I read on the positive qualities and the negative qualities, and then asked God to help me to get rid of the negative qualities. But when I study my Bible, I like to call what it is that I see, not by a personality type or a birth order. I like to call it God's principle of individuality. By the way, I don't have time, but individuality, individualization, individualism, very different words. I don't present individualism. I present individuality. I present individualization. Big difference. But let's take a look at the scripture. And so when we do, I see individuality in creation. Because right there, Genesis, God created male and female. Did you all notice that men and women think differently? Had you all noticed that? And because they think differently, actions follow thoughts. How about that? Recent studies, as if there needed to be a study, but there are. Men are from Mars, and women are from Venus, or something like that. Well, who cares on that? But certainly it is that men take in information and put it into a compartment up in their brain. And there's a box around it, and they put it there, and they even have a lid. They can close the lid, and then they go on. A lady takes in information and immediately connects it to another, and another, and another, and another, and another, and another. Very complex. Yes, God created us as individuals. And did my microphone just go off? Oh, because I lost my microphone. Something about overactivity. Hyperactivity. I hate that phrase. So here is Psalm 139. I will praise thee, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Marvelous are thy works. And that my soul knoweth right well, my substance was not hid from thee, when I was made in secret and curiously wrought in the lowest parts of the earth. Thine eyes did see my substance, yet being unperfect, and in thy book all my members were written, were fashioned, when as yet there was none of them. How precious also are thy thoughts toward me, O God, how great is the sum of them. A passage of scripture I could read all the day long. I love it. I love to study it. You ought to take a couple of words, thoughts. Wonderfully made. Wonderfully, you study the Hebrew word, you'll find out it means differently. There are distinctions in the way we are made. And yes, we are all human, but in the details of our humanity, we end up being different people. Substance was not hid. Substance refers to our frame, our skeleton. What an amazing mystery, even to modern science, figuring out how all that happens inside the womb. But curiously wrought means embroidered. Obviously I don't know embroidery, or I wouldn't use this as the illustration of it, but it means curiously wrought. We are embroidered, knitted together. The modern way of it's a beautiful description of the double helical DNA molecular structure by which we become ourselves. DNA, deoxyribonucleic acid, and that structure, perhaps you've seen it. I'll show you a picture here later for another subject. And unperfect, what is that? Unperfect means basically the embryo until delivered. Not imperfect, but just not ready yet. And, thank you, Henry Morris, for some of those thoughts from my Defender Study Bible, a man who is a scientist. I can't encourage you enough to purchase that volume. But, yes, creation. Well, wait a minute. Let me go back. There we go. Creation. The zebra. I put that in there because how does a mother zebra know that a baby zebra is hers? Don't they all look alike? How do you figure that out? Well, scientists say that after the calf is born, that the calf gets between its mother and the herd. The mother sees the calf's distinctive stripe pattern, and it becomes indelibly imprinted upon the mother's brain, and ever thereafter she knows which one is hers. Wow. And then this particular species of dog, people say to me, that's what people look like after they have gone through one of my workshops. Well, okay. Have it your way. Creation, we are individuals. As they say, no two snowflakes, no two leaves on any tree are alike. But what about in salvation? Well, the passage in Luke says that a man who has 100 sheep, if he loses one of them, what will he do? He will go after the one which is lost. And so, how is it you and I come to Christ? We come to Christ as individuals, even if we are in a large group and there is an invitation. But our salvation is when you and I, either literally or in our mind, we bow before the Lord. And we ourselves say, God, I believe in the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. And we accept him as our Savior. And we are born again. Can you get saved for someone else? No. You may want to get saved for someone else. You can encourage them, but you cannot get saved for them. It happens individually. Well, how about then the Christian life, where we begin to make Christ our Savior as our Lord? And, well, here's how Paul put it to the Galatians. He said, let every man prove his own work, and then he'll have rejoicing in himself alone and not in another. And every man shall bear his own burden. Whew. Do you think he got his point across? My suspicion is that most people remember the other part, the context, where it says, we bear one another's burden. But I tell you this, you cannot bear someone else's burden if you are so full of a messed up emotional life, social life, spiritual life, that everything is going all over and you are unfocused and there is just so many issues in your life. You need help. You need counsel. You've got to have this. I've got to get... Well, how can I be bearing other people's burdens when so much is going on in my own life that is a problem? Oh, that's why he says this. You better bear your own burden. Learn how to do it yourself. So then you can give yourself to others who are in great need. Talk about individualization in sanctification. Galatians is powerful. I love the way he said it to the church at Thessalonica. He said, study to be quiet. That's the part of the verse I don't like. That's the hard part. But then do your own business. Work with your own hands as we commanded you. Well, thank you, Paul, to the Thessalonians. If anyone doubts the principle of individualization in sanctification, Romans 12:2 should settle it. Because Paul said to the Romans, do not be conformed to this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind. What is this? Transformed. Well, you ought to put in your notes, that's the Greek word which is right in our English. We have a wonderful English word. If you pronounced it, it says metamorphosis. Yes, meta, beyond, morphe, change. That is it. Let there be a change. Morph, of course, is in internal. Well, so when you think of a metamorphosis from one form to another form, what do you think of? A butterfly. Oh, very good, very good. You have a firm grasp of the obvious, and that's wonderful. Well, so, yes, butterflies go through a metamorphosis. And I'm going to just remove this here for a second. A metamorphosis, a change. When you think of metamorphosis, changing from, well, before a butterfly is a butterfly, what is it? Somebody say. It's a caterpillar. Someone said a caterpillar. Okay, caterpillar. And a caterpillar, what does a caterpillar look like? Something like this. Someone said I should have been an actor. Well, a caterpillar. What happens after the caterpillar? What does it become? Or go into or something? A cocoon. Excellent. Wrong answer. Because butterflies don't go into a cocoon. They go into a, come on, you biological people, a chrysalis. Butterflies go into a chrysalis. Moths go into a cocoon. Ooh, see? Aren't you glad you came today? You have learned some biology, even though you didn't want to. Too bad. You shouldn't have come. Yes, well, so a caterpillar goes into a chrysalis. And so, what does a chrysalis look like? Well, it looks something like this. It looks like a cocoon, doesn't it? Remind you of it. But inside the chrysalis, something begins to happen. A change, a transformation, a metamorphosis begins to occur. And out of that chrysalis comes a butterfly. Yes, yes, yes. Oh, this butterfly is so, well. Someone said, well, Johnson, I've had students in our school just like you. But no problem, they said, because yesterday we killed him. No, I'm joking, of course. Yes. Now, a lot of frivolity for something very serious. Can you go through metamorphosis for someone else? How foolish, how foolish. It is immediately understood as impossible. I mean, impossible. So, two children in the same learning center, coming from the same home, having the same mom, the same dad, the same home environment. They go through the same paces. They hear the same messages in church, the same Bible verses they memorize, and they become very distinct adults. How is that? Well, it is called individualization. That's what it's called. In creation, we are individuals. In salvation, we are individuals. In sanctification, we are individuals. And when it comes to the subject we don't like to think about, in judgment, the believer at the judgment seat of Christ is judged. He will give an account of himself before God at the judgment seat. Or if you're in that unhappy crowd of unbelievers at the end of the age, standing before the great white throne judgment, it says they will be judged according to their works. And so there you have it. Individualization in creation, salvation, sanctification, and in judgment from Genesis to Revelation and everywhere in between. It is the individual, the individual, the individual, the individual. Now, wouldn't it have been great if someone would come up with a system that used God's principle of individuality that we see from Genesis to Revelation in creation, salvation, sanctification, and in judgment, and put it into a system of learning? There's the good news. It's called accelerated Christian education. You knew that was coming. But God designed each human being with a divine individuality. A.C.E. developed a curriculum to complement that God-given individuality. And now, after years of being criticized to the core, criticized out of the education departments in colleges and universities all over America, criticized out of the education departments in the most conservative Christian colleges in America. Now, the world of education has done a 360, and they're just the opposite of where they were at one time, because they have come to accept not only the philosophy, but struggling to find a way to accept a methodology that makes it work. And so today, A.C.E., School of Tomorrow, is on the cutting edge of educational theory, modern pedagogy. And after 40 years of pioneering a ministry, it is ready to show the way forward into the 21st century. Who will be persuaded? My prayer is you will be. And that's what I'm up to this week. Who will follow? Well, anyone who desires. And the word is, we can help you start a Christian school with individualization as its system and succeed with maintaining it. Well, let me now turn a corner. We've discussed this biblically, where I always like to start. What is the truth? What is in the good book? But I want to take a look at what's going on in the world. And I taught in a Bible college for 17 years a course called Philosophy of Education, Philosophy of Christian Education. In fact, I taught philosophy. So this is a subject I really enjoy. And I discovered a few years back that something was changing. And what was changing was the focus. And I know it quite well. I mean, I'm not up on everything, but I've read a lot of books on the subject of educational theory. And the focus started changing away from the teacher. Wow, how could that be? It's impossible. The teacher is the focus of the classroom, but it was moving. The focus was no longer on the teacher and the teaching, where the teacher is the source of the knowledge, to students and their learning. Wow, from teacher, the focus goes to the student, and from teaching, it goes to learning. Wow. I was amazed, because I knew what had gone on in the 40s and the 50s and the 60s. And, well, things, they are a-changin', as they say. Well, what was the motivating factor? It was academic research. I could have wished it was that people had begun reading their Bible, and they discovered individualization in creation, in salvation, in, well, you know the outline. But they didn't. It was academic research. And the person who really began to change things was a man by the name of Howard Gardner. A very academic, hefty tome called Frames of Mind, the Theory of Multiple Intelligences. And what he did in this heavy tome, he said different people are intelligent in different ways. Some people are intelligent with a synthetic mind. Others are intelligent with an analytic mind. Those are my words, not his. He has other words I don't want to get into, his outlining of his book, but having to do with musical learning or, tactile learning and these kind of things. Well, what is that called? If you learn differently than I learned, what is that called? It's called individualization. That in the schooling process, the individual is very, very important. Thank you, Howard Gardner. Well, in one way or another, Benjamin Bloom is connected in there, but he came earlier. Benjamin Bloom had a taxonomy of learning, as they would say, where he said you start with knowledge, then there's comprehension, analysis, application, analysis, synthesis, and evaluation. Well, yes, and this is exactly what you see in an A.C.E. PACE. You'll see knowledge, then required comprehension, then its application, how you analyze, then how you put it all together in a synthesis, and certain evaluation. It's called critical thinking skills. Well, somehow or another, this hefty tome, by the way, if you have trouble getting to sleep at night, buy this book. Put it beside your bed. I challenge you to read it for 20 minutes while you are horizontal. You will be in la la land, and you'll say, you know what? That was worth the price of the book. So here, I graduated from the University of Wisconsin. Here's their newsletter. River Falls, a new president. The president says, students learn differently today. Oh, yeah? How? Well, the professor must now act as a conduit to information. Conduit? What is that metaphor? Well, it's a channel. He says, students in a room for a lecture is very ineffectual. What? A university president saying that professors lecturing is inefficient in getting information across? What has schooling come to? Students are no longer bound by all these previous. Well, so I looked at Christian colleges, and here is one that says in their student handbook, they deliver an educational program that utilizes an individualized, personalized instructional method that is tailored to meet the individual learning needs of the student. What does that sound like? What does it sound like? A.C.E. I think they plagiarized our procedures manual. I'm joking, of course. So I went to another Christian college, and the president's column says, I'm grateful for every student and faculty member as they formally engage in learning, not just teaching. Ha! Ha! Who would have ever thunk it, as we used to say, that you would put teaching in the negative and learning up here? Wow! Things are changing. Yes, and I can prove it all the day long to people who want to be bored. But in a consistent system, methodology always follows philosophy. And so, if the philosophy is changing, you would expect the methodology to change. And it is. Oh my, it is. The focus is moving away from the techniques of the teacher, where the instructor imparts the knowledge, to procedures of students, where learning is more important than teaching. Whoo! Now, some would say, you just overstated your point. So, I'm mindful of that possible criticism, and I will attempt to answer it as we move along. But I'm going to say to you, it is not an overstatement. And you could put in your notes off to the side, systems of learning is the new phrase you want to use, because this is where the focus of attention has gone. And what is the motivating factor for the change? I could wish it was that people had begun to read their Bibles and discovered in creation God's principle of individuality. In sanctification after salvation, we grow as individuals. But no, it's not the case. It seems to be, this is my analysis, of the electronic technology, because it's all the interactive capabilities of smartphones. Too bad I have a dumb phone. I'm always asking questions, and I was somewhere yesterday, and I asked this lady a question, and she said, oh, just ask your phone, and, and it'll... I said, ma'am, my phone matches me. It can't do that. Well, iPads and iPods and e-readers and Mamma mia, sopapilla, everything is a-changin'. Even what is passé technology? I found the other day, it's the personal computer. Who would have ever thought the personal computer would be old technology? But it is. And so this is what has happened. Now, as we do this, I want to sit on this egg until I hatch it. And this is why I get all these things. Okay, so are you ready for lots of illustrations? Well, so here's an advertisement for a particular learning organization. And they're advertising why you ought to buy something from them. But they're using two students who are studying some pretty fancy advanced science, if you ask me, having to do with the DNA. But what is missing from the picture, and I can tell you it's by design, it's the teacher. The teacher, well, okay, the teacher is there, but out of focus in the background. It's the learners that are in the focus. Wall Street Journal had an article called Prof in the Box, and they predicted that this organization and others like them would change the face of future education. People in the business world know the name Peter Drucker, a guru who wrote many, many books on how to make a profit. Well, before he passed this world, he wrote a book on managing the nonprofit organization. And one such nonprofit organization is the school. And here is Peter Drucker years ago saying that you must put the learning responsibility on the student rather than the teaching responsibility on the teacher. And without all this responsibility, said his friend in the interview, and without the engagement by students, the results are very, very meager. Students must be engaged, but it is the student's responsibility to learn, not the teacher. Whoa, whoa. Well, engage. There's a buzzword. Every academic discipline has buzzwords. You need to learn them. So I read that. I pick up USA Today, not a magazine, not a newspaper I usually recommend, but there it is. What schools across the USA are doing to what? To what? Engage students. Yes, students have got to be engaged. And so someone started a new government program. Oh, yay, yay, another government program. We're saved. Well, not really. But this is the way I'm saying it. Well, okay, so this government program surveying student engagement, they say you can gauge the quality of education by looking at how actively involved the students are with their studies. The more engaged the students are, the more likely they are to learn. Student engagement, the quality goes up. It makes me think of this. Did anybody recognize a poor pantomime of an A.C.E. learning center procedure? Yes, where students are engaged in the process. Yes, they are. Yes. Okay, don't do that. I won't. So they're very much engaged. Well, the government survey said quality goes up. I read the Tennessean. I live in the Nashville area. Front page of the newspaper, it says metropolitan math scores jump. What? There's a school system in America where math scores are rising? You gotta be kidding me. I'm gonna read this. We changed the method of delivering the curriculum. Well, instead of having a prescribed way of doing this and that today and tomorrow, instead, we look at where the student is and then pull them up to where they ought to be. Oh, you have to know exactly where a student is, and then you work with that student according to where they are and bring them along point by point by point. What a good idea. What a great idea. Well, before we did not have a systemic way of being student-centered or of addressing students individually. Well, now we did, and when we did, the math scores went up. And what does that sound like? A.C.E. I'm reading Newsweek magazine a few years ago, and they said in a special edition that there is a knowledge revolution. Ooh, what revolution is that? Well, the article says it is a classless act, a classless revolution. What are you talking about? Well, modern education systems are moving toward more individualized learning. What does that sound like? A.C.E. I didn't say it. Newsweek said it. Blame them. Could you imagine that I was shocked when I picked up the paper and read this headline: "The End of Grade Levels?" Question mark. End of grade levels? What? You got to be kidding me. I double-checked. You don't want to take one source for granted. You have to have, you want a double blind, eh? Well, so the Christian Science Monitor headline was, a Colorado school district does away with their grade levels. Whoa, Westminster, Colorado, 10,000 students who said individualization in a school was for small schools. I'll tell you who says it: small-minded people who say that. And, well, we're going to have a real school and get rid of the individualized learning. What dummies. Well, I shouldn't say that. I'm going to be nice starting tomorrow. Okay. And so, yeah, doing away with grade levels. Well, then this article said a school district up in Alaska was at the bottom of the academic structure in Alaska. They changed their method of delivery. They began doing individualization, and in 5 years, they went from the bottom academically to the top. And, well, I tell you what, this is quite amazing. Now, I'm going to take a time out of that structure, and let me just remind you of what it is we just said. I started the day by saying, if you want quality Christian schooling, you ought have an individualized program. Now, do you think I've gone a fair distance in proving it or evidencing it? That would be maybe a better word. But I want to take a time out from that process and tell you something else has emerged in recent years. And we don't have time to go into it, but this will tell you what it's all about. I found out of the Stanford University, the Stanford Social Innovation Review, an article entitled "Rethinking Self-Esteem." Oh my, everybody talks about self-esteem. Why, this is just so important. They're rethinking it. What's going on? Well, the article says that they have discovered through accumulated research that has shaken the psychologist's faith in self-esteem. They found out that not only was self-esteem failing to accomplish what they hoped, it backfired and contributed to the very problem they thought it would thwart. So, they said, in the article's author, he said, in my opinion, what is far better is to have self-control. Self-control as your emphasis rather than self-esteem? My. Well, sub-article. In the same article, they say, well, maybe we better start coaching what? Anybody want to read the word? Coaching what? Coaching character. Character, yes, character. This is what they are talking about. And so the article went on to say that the study found that a student's self-esteem rose after getting good grades and fell when he got bad grades. How about that? So it's kind of like, let's say, me coming into a school. I'm in 5th grade, and they give me a diagnostic test, and my math ability is 3rd level. I am missing 2 years of information in my head, and I don't want to go to school. I'm going to flunk math. I've been flunking math for years. Kids laughed at me, poked at me. My parents criticized me mercilessly for my grades in school, and it's just turning me into nuts. But I come to this school. They give me a diagnostic test. They discover my level. They give me a bite-sized piece of information where I can succeed. I work through the math. I take the PACE test. I got an 85. I passed it. I passed the math test. I passed the math test. Look, Dad. Look, Mom. I passed the math test. What do you think the parents do? Ooh, we're such good parents. Yes, we're good at parenting. We're succeeding. And what happened to their parenting self-esteem? It went up. What happened to the student's self-esteem? It went up. And, well, trying to boost self-esteem generally has no discernible effect on academic behavior. So they say that, said, well, let's give up on self-esteem. And they said, invest in self-control. They said, now self-control sounds a lot like what people used to call character. Guess what, Stanford? They still do. They still do. And so let's invest in self-control and ignore self-esteem. I tell you what, folks, that is big. And there's a whole lot more to the story, and I'll only give you the tip of the iceberg. In this man, Wall Street Journal, by the way, good newspaper, you ought to read it, especially the last 2 pages of the first section, editorial page and book reviews, conservative viewpoint. But here in September 2011, the 3rd and 4th, this journalist, very good journalist evidently, researched, and he said a wealth of information is coming out on attention. And here's a little girl, very much attentive to what is in front of her. And he says, the key to strengthening what psychologists call executive function is the brain making the decisions as to what happens rather than feelings, rather than emotions, rather than your body. The brain tells you what to do next. It's called executive function. Nice new buzzword. And the executive function and the skills that allow us to control our thoughts and our impulses. Children who can regulate their own impulses and their own attention are less likely to commit crime and do drugs. And they've identified the character traits of persistence, self-control, and delayed gratification. Anybody want to talk about 60 character traits woven into an educational system that regardless of what academic subject you're studying, you are developing and working on your own personal character traits? Whoa, whoa. When the public starts talking about it, why wouldn't Christians start Christian schools where they could teach Christian character? Why wouldn't they? Do you get the impression that some days I get exasperated? I do, because it makes no sense that the Christian school movement is not growing by leaps and bounds. The current status. We've gone from philosophy to methodology. They call it assessment. Our old word was accreditation, but it is assessment, all right, and the focus is moving from managing school leadership, or the emphasis is on leadership over the group, to measuring student learning, where outcome is the most important thing. They want to measure student learning. This is what is important. So I pick up the Wall Street Journal headline. In one of the sections, it says, accreditors are seeking ways to what? Measure teaching? No, it's not about teaching. They're seeking ways to measure learning. The article said, we're going to do a better job of measuring learning. This is a shift, making us think about how students learn. Mamma mia, sopa-pia. What does that sound like? It sounds like A.C.E., what we've been saying for 40 years, and education departments would not give us the time of day, even in the Christian colleges. Well, so now regional accreditors have revamped the rules to emphasize student learning. What has this world come to? They're not going to emphasize the teacher's teaching. No, and no. So what is the motivating factor? Well, you study it. I call it cultural changes, demanding on performance. I would have thought that always the case, but something about technology savvy, quality workmanship. Yeah, this is what's moving it. I wish it had been that people had read their Bible and discovered individualization in judgment. And they said, you know, if God's going to judge us as individuals, maybe we better get busy. But that's not the case. Well, philosophy, methodology, assessment. It has changed. I talked about assessment in America. We're worldwide, as you know. Here, there's an organization in England, pardon me, but I penned the letters, NAREC, the National Authority for the Recognition of International Curriculum. Then they changed their words to just the National Resource Information Center. But at any rate, Narek went to an island nation where we had a school using A.C.E., and the government got after us viciously. And the officials went to England, because they were under the British system, and knocked on the door of Narek. And they said, would you come and investigate our curriculum so we can evidence the government that we are quality? And they came, great expense, by the way, and they judged the curriculum, not the school, the curriculum. And they said their I.C.E. certificate was comparable to the A levels of the Cambridge International Exam and the O level. Why? Because every student works at his own pace. Because virtues and qualities are taught along with the academic curriculum. Because the opportunity to succeed is available to all, including regardless of the way in which you learn. And rewards are built into it. And there are disincentives or punishment for poor behavior, yet at no sense detrimental to the child. The standard of English is very high. The pupils are taught not to disrupt other students. And there's a high degree of mutual respect which characterizes relationships within the school. Yay! Hooray! Hooray! Everybody would rejoice over that. Not the London Times educational supplement came out with a gigantic headline that says, fundamentalist exams on the par with A levels. How dare they? These people who are conservative in their views of the Bible on the level with our Cambridge International Exam. Blah, blah, blah. Well, why? Because they teach creation instead of evolution. They don't care the quality. What level? A level, it doesn't get better than that, folks. We don't care. You don't teach evolution, leaving God out of it, making man an animal. And so we're going to just blah you to death. Well, thank you, London. Well, welcome to the world. Europe, what a great thing has happened with the Narek evaluation. I went to China for CETA, the Southern Association of Colleges and Schools. It's one of the regional accrediting agencies in America. They have a quadrennial convention, and along with CETA, the Commission on International and Transregional Accreditation. And when I was there, listening to Chinese educators inside a communist government, I heard them say this. Dr. Tan Songhua, chairman of the China Educational Council, said, future reforms of schools should adapt learning needs of individual students. Zhang Minxing, chairman of the Shanghai Society of Education, said, and I quote, I believe that a student learning how to study for himself is more significant than learning from a teacher. What does that sound like? A.C.E. Don't talk too loud, because you'll wake up the critics who are hiding under their desks. Well, we need less teaching, he said, and more learning. Hoya moya, Dr. Yin Hongking, pardon me, you folks who know how to pronounce correctly. The problem with our past education has been we've been focused on teaching, not learning. Study is richer when it is personalized. Well, have I persuaded you? There's evidence by the glory, hallelujah. In schools, it is now the big thing to have distance learning. I'm out lecturing, and I pick up the newspaper, and out of it falls this supplement on distance learning. I picked it up. It said, the digital revolution has changed the way we learn. We're likely to take self-paced tutorials today, and students have to learn how to learn. Students must be active participants in the learning process. And they will move at their own pace, and they're likely to have a pace chart. What? Does anybody recognize these points of methods? What does it sound like? A.C.E. That's what it sounds like. In curriculum, they're calling it differentiated instruction. You, the teacher, in a conventional classroom, by the way, we call it conventional. We refer to ourselves as traditional because traditionally students learned with tutors in one-room schools, in living rooms and homes, and that's how it was. We are traditional in our individual learning styles. They are conventional. Well, so here is a scholar on the subject. Her name is Carol Ann Tomlinson, the differentiated school. Now, here's what it looks like when teachers start differentiating between every single student in the classroom for math. Every single student in... Listen, I went to one of the workshops and sat in the back of the room. And the school teachers who have 25 to 30 students who are being told you have to differentiate between everyone and every subject, they began to pull their hair out. How do you do that in a conventional classroom? Great question. I feel sorry for them. It's impossible. The business world, you know, often gets involved in education. Here's the Wall Street Journal advertisement, 4 pages from the Intel organization, fueling innovation worldwide through creative education. I read the article, and what does it say? The role of the teacher and the student is changing. The teacher's role is no longer to act as the knowledge source, but to help guide the students to discover and manage the knowledge that is available to them. What does that sound like, folks? It sounds like A.C.E. There are books on the subject, not many. You can find them. It's called, this man, his name is James Keefe, Personalized Instruction. You should write that phrase down. You'll run across it. Most people in these couple of years don't refer to individualization. They call it personalized, because it's more personal sounding. And when this man writes on how to have a personalized education, he said the first thing you do when a student comes to your school is diagnose them. And then you prescribe the curriculum after you find out what the student is capable of doing. And then you have the students set goals. What does that sound like? Sounds like A.C.E. By the way, he talks about a dozen examples. I tried to communicate with him on why he left us out. But that is another whole subject. People do not like Bible-based learning, as we know in England. Well, it's been around a long time, individualized instruction. and somebody popularized Howard Gardner's multiple intelligences. They called it 7 kinds of smart. You have the popularizers coming along. Well, so what's next? The end of the road. Homeschooling is on the rise in America. Why? Because students can learn at their own pace in the home. In the home, yes. How are you going to be doing this in the home? Here's an advertisement from an organization that said, you can buy this product from us and set it up on your kitchen table. And so the student then has his own little office. We ought to get royalties from this. How many times do people say, you're not a school? Where are your desks? Your desks are supposed to be in a row. You know, well, oh boy. And we'll shut that off. And you know what you all need is true education. So now is the time that we pass this out to every student here. And you get a copy of True Education written by H. Edward Rowe, a well-known older generation Christian educator who said true education is individualized learning, true to individuality. And I updated the statistics in there. And so why don't you write this in your notes in case you'll forget, like me. You can go online at our website and download the updated version of this, giving a different set of statistics. I think that might be helpful. Did I persuade you? Don't answer me. That's a rhetorical question. We're in a battle, as you all know, and this is a good one. Okay, who stole my clicker? Did you do it? Oh, why did you put it there? Well, thank you for pointing it out. Individualization, divine design. It's not just a divine design. It is an excellent, modern, 21st century pedagogy that emphasizes God's principle of individuality and assists us to help every student, so literally, not politically, there is no child left behind.